Good evening. This is Clarence Williams with another edition of Now and Then. I want to talk to you about the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. I thank God that this day has finally come. But let me go back and give you a little history that has happened that brought about the war between Israel and Hamas. If you remember, in October the 7th, 2023, Hamas attacked a social that was being held in a park and killed about 360 participants of that social and took about 251 captive. From that scene, from that event, Netanyahu and Israel started an all-out assault on Gaza. Netanyahu and his forces continually bombed Gaza, all under the skies of getting rid of Hamas. They killed indiscriminately. They killed babies, children, young people, teenagers, young adults, old people, women's children, men's, everyone that was there. And anytime that someone will say something about it, they will say that Hamas is using this particular house, using this particular school, using this particular building as their headquarters, and that gave them the right to bomb it. It did not matter what else or whom else was in there. If they said Hamas was using it as their headquarters or one of their hiding places, they had the right to bomb it. Journalists was killed, doctors was killed, nurses were killed, staff in the hospitals was killed, patients in the hospital was killed. Everything was bombed, and they did that for 2 years, constantly. They did that, and they did it to such an extreme way that the whole world began to turn against Israel. Now there's some has always been against Israel, but this is because of past actions of Netanyahu and Israel as a whole. But this particular time, it got so much worse, so much bitterness, so much evil, so much destruction, that regardless of what the presidents of the United States said, Netanyahu refused to relent. Now he has some right-wing people in his administration that did not want him to stop bombing, did not want the war to end. They wanted to use this October 7th violence against these people in this park to totally annihilate Hamas. And even if it meant getting rid of every Palestinian in Gaza, it did not matter. In fact, pretty much at the end, they start saying they're going to take the rest of the Palestinians and move them totally off of the Gaza Strip and then reconstruct Gaza into some type of place for the rich and famous. So they had a plan. Even President Trump says this. So regardless of what happened, they were bombing. But as they were bombing, and as the news was getting out of the destruction that was happening, people began to see for themselves what was happening and began to turn their minds against Netanyahu and against Israel. They did that in the United States. And do you remember? At least three superintendents or presidents of at least three colleges resigned because they went before Congress and they were challenged as to their policies concerning protection of the Jewish students that was on their campus. And when they, for some reason, found there was no policy, maybe the superintendents, presidents gave an answer that was not satisfactory. Eventually, all three of them had to resign. President Trump pretty much stopped all public protests against Israel. Not stopped it as far as sending National Guards, but stopped it by saying if you do protest, you're going to be persecuted. And as a result of that, even the foreign students that was protesting, he was going to take away their visas and send them back home, and was not going to allow any other visas to be approved to come into the United States, and challenged all of the colleges. Listen, we have to approve these visas for these students to come, and if you're allowing them to come into your university and protest against the government of the United States or against Israel, we will not approve it. So they had everything going that was going to stop, and it did, the protests. Even the law people, the Congress people in the House and in the Senate was being persecuted because they were out there in some of these rallies protesting against Israel. They were making certain statements that was against Israel or against the violence, the brutality that was happening over in Gaza. So everything was going, but the other countries, the other citizens of the other countries were not being threatened the way the citizens of the United States was being threatened. They were protesting. They were having rallies in opposition to Netanyahu, in opposition to Israel, and the leadership of these other countries began to back their citizens against what was happening in Gaza. And in the last United Nations Assembly, at least 42 countries did something that was unprecedented. They stood up and each one of them gave a speech totally against Israel and said that they was going to vote for a dual nation in the Middle East, that the Palestinians should have their own nation. At least 142 said that. And then, after the end of the United Nations, that number moved up to 159. You had two nations that went against that vote. That was Israel and the United States of America. Donald Trump has always backed Israel, regardless of what Netanyahu did. The citizens of Israel even is against Netanyahu now. And they blame Netanyahu for the prolonging of the war because they wanted their loved ones, the hostages, to be brought home. But they were saying that since Netanyahu was having his legal problems before October the 7th, that now he is prolonging the war because he don't want to face the legal battles that he has already waiting for him in in Israel. And so they are totally against Netanyahu. Then the other countries are now turning against Netanyahu. And they are now saying that Palestinians should have their own state. Remember that. Donald Trump also said he saw the starvation. He saw the starving children. And he acknowledged that these children are being starved to death. But even that, he did not turn against Netanyahu. Now, I say he did not turn against Netanyahu. Recently, he said he'd been talking to Netanyahu. You don't really know what they've been talking about behind, closed doors. But at least 5 meetings Donald Trump has had Netanyahu in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump can see or could see that the tide was turning against Israel, turning against Netanyahu, turning against what Netanyahu was doing to the citizens of Gaza. All of those big trucks sitting out there waiting with all that food, and Israel is letting them come in 1 at a time, 3 at a time, 10 at a time, or none at a time, or asking the people of Gaza, go to the north and you will get some food. And then once they go to the north to receive the food, then soldiers open fire on them and kill them. Seeing all of that, and Donald Trump still held with Netanyahu and with Israel, and still said that Israel has the right to defend itself. And when you start challenging that, he will always go back to October the 7th. But now, because of the pressure of all those other Arab states, Donald Trump figures he need to do something with Netanyahu, because the tide is turning, and now he could see eventually it will be World War III over in the Middle East. And so he gets involved now, talking directly to Netanyahu. Man, you need to stop this. This is my opinion. Man, you need to stop this. And so he comes up with a 20-point plan to end the war, bring all the hostages back, including those that was deceased over in Gaza, and for Netanyahu or Israel to release all of the prisoners that they have in their jails, the Palestinians. But now you have to get these other nations to agree to that. Well, they are going to agree to it because they are ready to do something to Netanyahu and Israel. So if you have a plan to stop it, then they're okay. They're all for it. Donald Trump talks, gets everything together. Now he goes over to Israel and he has a speech with the leaders of Israel, and still talking that same talk that he is all for Netanyahu and Israel. It's reported that he now are asking the people or the law or the leaders of Israel to pardon Netanyahu. Now, was that a plan all the time? Netanyahu say, okay, I'll agree to it, to the ceasefire, I'll agree to the stop the war, but you're going to have to help me get pardoned. I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm talking. But he makes this statement. You need to pardon Netanyahu. Now, the people are totally against Netanyahu, and they want him persecuted or prosecuted. But this is Donald Trump now trying to influence the situation over there in Israel. Then he has to leave Israel and go to Egypt to sign the ceasefire agreement. Now, wait a minute. Netanyahu and the leadership of Hamas has to sign the agreement of ceasefire in the war. But Netanyahu is not going to Egypt with Donald Trump. And I don't even know whether Hamas is there. Now, both of them had prior agreed to the plan. But I don't see neither one of them signing an agreement. I see Donald Trump going to Egypt, and I see all of the foreign leaders around him, including the Prime Minister of Great Britain and some of those European leaders, some of those Arab leaders. I see all of them standing behind him. But I don't see Netanyahu, and I don't see leadership from Hamas. And then he signs it, and I guess maybe they signed it also, and then he holds it up. And now everybody's supposed to assume that the war is over, the ceasefire is over. But then think about this. Part of that ceasefire, part of that plan for Netanyahu to stop bombing was that they're supposed to pull their troops back to a certain point. Not get out, but pull them back to a certain point and stop the bombing. And Hamas supposed to lay down their arms and surrender, I guess. Netanyahu pulled back and then said that they still reserve the right to start bombing Gaza again if Hamas does not hold up its end of the bargain. Is this thing over? Or is it not? Why did Donald Trump step in now when he says at the beginning of his administration, I will stop the war. I will end the war day one. Why did he step in now to do it? Because the Arab nations started talking about they are now supporting a nation of the Palestinians. Too much pressure. And so now he has to step in and do something. But we have a long way to go. Thank God the bombing has stopped. Thank God the killing has stopped. But I am trusting in President Trump now. Yes, I am. I am trusting in him to keep his foot on the fire, to hold Netanyahu back. Because if he does not do that, then Netanyahu is going to start bombing again. And then now all of these Palestinians that's coming back into Gaza now is going to be sitting out there in the streets because they have nowhere else to go nor live. And it's going to be a great massacre there. And then these Arab countries are going to get involved in this fight. And you're going to have World War III. This is Clarence Williams. And this is another edition of Now and Then. Pray that God will intervene into someone's heart. Thank you so much.